Morning. It's Wednesday, July 25th, 2018, about 10:01 a.m. This is a Curry County Board of Commissioners workshop. It's not a general meeting, but a workshop. We have to my left Administrator Schroeder, myself, Commissioner Huxley. We have on the phone Commissioner Gold, who is calling in. And further to the right, Council Huddle and Administrative Assistant John Jesuit. We have, again, called the meeting to order. Do we have any adoption or amendments of the agenda? Administrator Schroeder?
Nope.
Council Huddle?
I don't have anything to add. I'll be letting you know that I won't be here Friday afternoon is all.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a little confused, by several of these items that were on here, in that we had an item listed, but there wasn't any information, that was attached in the packet. But that said, and the fact that we have no amendments, we're going to go right to agenda item 3, which is a Red Cross presentation by Carissa. And is it Hettich? I was close. Okay. Let me see. You want to go up there, please?
I'll give you this.
Thank you.
And I'll leave the other two as well for the commissioners.
Okay. Do you want to look at one of these while you're back? John, you want to look at this while?
Thank you.
Krista, would you have this information in a PDF that we could put on to our meeting notes?
Absolutely, sure.
Okay, if you could just send that to me or to John, we'll post that to our website then as part of the minutes for this
Absolutely,
meeting.
sure. Well, thank you, Curry County Commissioners and Administrator and Council for letting me speak with you today. My name is Carissa Hettich, and I'm the Executive Director for the Southwest Oregon chapter of the Red Cross. Our chapter area encompasses 10 counties in Southwest Oregon. So on the left-hand side of the packet, probably one page deep, there's a map that kind of shows how our territory is kind of divided and our coverage area. So the Red Cross, why it's important for the Red Cross to meet with the local government officials is to let you know about the programs that we offer and then how we support your communities in times of disaster. So most people think of Red Cross, they think of blood and flood. Usually I work on the chapter side of Red Cross, so people ask me a lot about blood and vice versa. And we do manage 40% of the nation's blood supply, which is a lot of blood across the country. And I pulled some numbers just to share with you our involvement of blood collection in Curry County. And we donated last fiscal year, so fiscal year 18, we collected 715 units of blood within Curry County. We mostly do mobile blood drives with the blood buses or either indoor setups. And we do engage youth in this process, and we host blood drives at Gold Beach High School, Brookings High School, and then we also do 2 community blood drives in Brookings as well as Gold Beach. So the reason why that's important is because the youth between the ages of 18 and 24, they manage 20% of the nation's blood supply between those 6 years. And why it's especially critical to host blood drives in the summertime is when kids are not in school and we can't collect 50 to 100 units per blood drive, then we have to make up the difference with community blood drives or having a corporate group sponsor. And if you are going through leukemia or cancer treatment, you need platelets and plasma, and burn victims and preemie babies, they need blood products. And even if you were to drive out of here, cross the road, get T-boned, you could be in the hospital and needing to receive 40 units to 100 units of blood because of internal bleeding. And there's just things that you just don't expect, and that's why the Red Cross is here. And during times of natural disaster, for instance, when we had the winter storms out east earlier this year, they had to cancel hundreds of blood drives because their staff and the donors couldn't get to the blood sites. So the Red Cross, using our national network, we were able to bring blood products from other parts of the country to the East Coast to fill up their hospitals. Before Hurricane Harvey made landfall, we pre-deployed 1,000 units of blood into Houston, knowing it was going to take 2 to 3 days before anything could get in there, and we stocked up the hospitals with 1,000 units of blood to kind of ride them through the storm. So that's why it's important that we have a steady and regular blood supply. So I encourage you, when you do see that blood sign saying Red Cross is donating blood, it takes an hour. And so we really appreciate, and you can donate really every 2 months, every 56 days. And the really neat thing with Red Cross is that you're notified about 2 or 3 weeks afterwards where your blood went. So I donated on June 29th. And I found out that my unit of blood went to Hillsborough, to a community hospital. So that's kind of a neat thing that Red Cross does. Another thing that Red Cross, our number one disaster, people think of us as like the tornadoes and the hurricanes and especially now the wildfires, but our number one disaster that we respond to locally is single-family house fires. So that is our number one across the whole country. And how the Red Cross responds to that is that we are notified by the fire department that someone's been affected, they don't have any resources or a place to go. Our volunteers show up at the scene. I think I did about 60 fires in 1 year when I worked for the Red Cross several years ago in a small county area. You show up at the scene, we give them a client assistance card, we upload funds onto that card, and the clients can choose, do I need to buy pajamas or do you need to buy shoes? They can make their choice of what type of things will help them in their recovery process. And then as well as, because like your most basic needs is, where am I going to sleep? What am I going to eat? And what am I going to wear? Those are the 3 things that is going to run through someone's mind when you just see your house up in flames. And the Red Cross shows up. We're required to show up within 2 hours of those disasters and provide them that assistance, and we do some follow-up casework. So we're a bridge over the river for 2 or 3 days, and then we get them connected to get them stabilized to kind of make their next steps. Another thing that the Red Cross started to do about 4 years ago is we do so much on the response side of Red Cross. We want to do more on the prevention side. So we've been installing free smoke alarms, and also I think on the first page on the right-hand side, there's a flyer there that has a number. It's a hotline number where you can call and request a smoke alarm, and then our Red Cross volunteers will call that person and say, okay, we're available on Tuesday between 2 to 4. Can we come to your house and install the smoke alarm? So we have done that. And in Curry County, we installed, only just last year, we only did about 14 smoke alarms. But across the region, across the region since we kicked off this campaign, we've done over 19,000 smoke alarms. So we have to kind of target our areas. We do have a really strong base of volunteers. A lot of them came to us last fall during the Chetco bar fire. So we had a lot of local Red Crossers, plus new people that came to say, I want to help out with these efforts. And so those volunteers, I actually sat with them when we had our Disaster Academy in Salem, and there is a group of like 6 or 7 of them that are really, really engaged. And so they've been getting additional training, and they've also gone out to deploy on other relief operations, which is great. So they go and deploy for 2 weeks at a time, and then they come back and have those added skills. So this is something that we would like to share with you, posting in your minutes, posting on your website, promoting the fact that we do have this service. We have the volunteers here able to do it. We just need to get the word out there so more people know about this and we can serve them. Across the country, the reason why Red Cross did this is because it's the number one cause of death is home fire death, and that's something in large part is preventable. So in certain areas, when we did our Sound the Alarm campaign, we focused in Sutherland, Madras, and Portland as the 3 big communities, and this was like a highlight. So we do this year round, but we just focus specifically on 3 communities in April and May. We installed over 1,200 smoke alarms in those 3 communities. And we focused on certain mobile home parks, the neighborhoods that are considered more at risk because of the elderly, lower income, children, mobile homes, so just the type of construction, they're more vulnerable to home fires. So we talk about, we install the smoke alarms that have the 10-year lithium battery. So even if you have a hardwired alarm, it's like I've lived in my house 20 years, I have a hardwired alarm, I'm okay. When you push the button and it beeps, that means the battery works. But can it sniff out smoke when you're burning toast? That's the difference. So sometimes the sensors of the smoke alarms, usually if they're more than 5 to 7 years old that you've installed it, they're kind of expired. They do have life expectancies. And the newer smoke alarms that we're installing have a lithium battery that's built into the smoke alarm, so you can't remove it when you are burning toast. And we encourage you to put it right next to it or in other places around the house. We also talk about home fire safety because cooking is a #1 disaster, as well as smoke, over juicing the sockets when you have too many computers and TVs plugged in. So those are areas where people don't realize that fires can start internally. And then also a fire escape plan. So when you go out the back door, your wife goes out the front door, and your kid jumps out the window, where's your rendezvous point? So if you don't see that your kid's outside, you're going to run back in the house and look for your kid. But the kid's already at the mailbox. So that's where you need to talk as a family, where are we going to meet after this home fire, regardless of how we get out of the house. And you have less than 2 minutes to get out of your house because fire doubles in size every 30 seconds. So those are parts of the things, education tips that we share. So related to like the local disasters, Chetco Bar was a 3-week operation for us last fall. And we had a shelter open in Brookings and Gold Beach within that area. Wildfires are ever changing, evacuation orders. We've dealt with several, like right now we had some in Klamath, we've had some in Josephine County, in Medford. So we have, I keep getting notices of like, we're opening a shelter here and there. A lot of them are just emergency shelters where people can come and get information. But also, we are having more and more people stay as the evacuation levels expand. And again, that's an ever-changing scenario, and we work closely with the local government partners with that. So what I want to do today is just kind of share with you our main lines of service. It is a blood donation, so we thank the Brookings community and the Curry community and Gold Beach for hosting the blood drives for us. We really do appreciate that. And then also just sharing with areas about installing the smoke alarms, how we train our volunteers. We meet on a monthly basis. And another lesser known service that we have is called the Services to the Armed Forces. And the Red Cross, we are a nonprofit organization. People think that we're quasi-governmental because we work alongside government partners. But that was our original line of service because it dates back to Clara Barton, the Angel on the Battlefield. So one of the main points that we do with Services to Armed Forces is that we do the emergency communication. So let's say mom and dad live here in Gold Beach and their son's in Korea. Dad has a heart attack. The mom can't necessarily call the son up and say, hey honey, come home, dad's in the hospital. The military is like, we need a Red Cross message to verify that. So mom calls the Red Cross, we call the county hospital, and we talk to the attending nurse and physician. We get the diagnosis, we type up the message and send it to command, and then they decide whether the service member comes home. So that way, because the Red Cross and we're neutral and independent, we can verify that. So that's our key line of service. And then also with the military came to us because of the issues of veterans having difficulty readjusting to civilian life after multiple deployments, including National Guard. We are offering reconnection workshops where our mental health workers are certified in facilitating these 2-hour family-based sessions to talk about opening the communication and helping the readjustment to ease in that process. So those are just a few of our programs. I included a couple packets in there. The things like the 5 things to know about Red Cross and our 5 lines of service. It's really interesting to kind of read through that if you have a choice. And I'll give you all my business card, and I just want to have just a connection to you, knowing that it is wildfire season. We do live in the land of Cascadia. We do advocate for preparedness. So we are partners in this, and I just want to have an open lines of communication with the local governments. You have any questions? Yes.
Just thank you very much. During the Chetco Bar fire, your people from Medford and all over were just tremendous to work with, and always always early to get where they needed to be. And fire meeting less than a week ago, I met two of your people from Medford that made a really good presentation. So
Good.
I didn't know you were executive director, so
Yes.
that's nice to know, and thank you.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. And you know, I cover 10 counties, so I kind of have to plan my travels accordingly. But your immediate chapter, there's a disaster program manager that works out of Medford and covers the 5 or 6 counties here in Southern Oregon. So his name is Joel King. He's a retired fire chief from Sutherland, longtime Red Cross volunteer. He knows Red Cross. He loves his job. So he's the one who's working with the Curry County volunteers. And also to let you know, at the Curry County Fair, we do have a Red Cross booth where we are recruiting for more Red Cross volunteers. So we are alive and well here.
The fair is officially open. That's why I'm 15 minutes late.
Ah, good.
Thank you again.
Absolutely. And I will give you a couple of business cards here. So, all right.
Thank you, Carissa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks so much.
Okay, the next item is item number 4. Rich Christensen on equipment purchase.
Good morning, Commissioners. I have some extra copies of some of the paperwork I'm using if you would like to have that to see while I'm going over these items.
Now, this is,
Do you put this in front of with the commissioners?
Yesterday, yes.
Huh? Okay. Do you have this?
It's in my office.
No.
So
Same-
What
same
Mr.
with me.
Jesuit did a good job.
Okay. Before we start on here, I just wanted to highlight for the commissioners that he's going to be explaining 4 separate pieces of equipment. He's recommending for the road department that are budgeted. 3 of them are budgeted and 1 of them is not. So if we feel there's direction or support from the commissioners for the 1 piece of equipment which is not in the budget, there has to be a supplemental budget process to go through to approve that before we would bring it back to the Board of Commissioners for that.
Rich, I do have a question. Primarily, this equipment was for the chip seal. Is that correct?
Not all of it. The Bros broom would be for the chip seal, the one that was not in this year's equipment replacement budget, and then it wasn't even on our 5-year plan. And the first one is the Bros broom, and so I'll just get to it. In the last 3 years, we spent approximately $30,000 in repairs and maintenance on this piece of equipment. It's a go-to piece of equipment. It's used for chip seal and all our preventive maintenance programs with brush cutting and ditching for sweeping off the roads when we're done. It's pulled by a utility truck. It's really not maneuverable or user-friendly. And so it's breaking down all the time. And as you know, we mobilize out a couple hours to the north end of the county. It breaks down out there. We have to send fleet maintenance up there to go work on it. We're wasting time. We're not being efficient and effective with our time, and standing by waiting for this thing to get fixed. And so what I'm really looking, this just came on my radar here like 4 weeks ago, because there's another costly repair coming up on this thing, and I'm saying stop. I don't want to dump any more money in this thing. So what I did is I went on the internet for a Bros 350 broom. That's what the state uses, and we maintain that equipment for the state. So I'm looking to mirror what the state has, so we don't have to double stock brushes and brooms and parts. And but I was only able to get municipal pricing from the manufacturer, and I'm still working to see if I could get NJPA pricing or state pricing on this equipment, maybe get it down. But with with the municipal pricing for a cost of a trailer, and this one here won't be pulled. This one you actually drive down the road like a car, and it's highly maneuverable. And also there's going to be a front blade on it, so when we, in the wintertime, when we have all these little slips or slides on our, with gravel on our roads, it'll be able to blade them off and then broom right behind it, so it's going to be really good for that as well. So we're looking, because it needs a trailer, $81,000 for the cost of a trailer and the broom. And like I say, we spent approximately $30,000 in the last 3 years, and I have another good-sized bill coming up if we're going to keep maintaining the current pull broom.
So I have a question, Richard. How much time are you, downtime are you having? How much extra are you having to spend as a result of this?
I haven't quantified that other than foreman telling me that it's been causing delays on projects. I can get that information.
Richard,
What did you say, $30,000 in the last 5 years?
3 years.
3 years?
Yes.
Okay. And how much is the bill that you're going to be spending, the big bill now, if you have to repair it?
At the current pricing that I have is $81,000.
No, I mean to repair the existing machine.
I believe it's $1,600.
Okay.
Richard, I have a question. When you're looking at these purchases, do these have to go out for competitive bids, or are you using the equivalent of a state pre-approved purchase program?
I'm trying to use a pre-approved purchase program, either the National NJPA, National Joint Powers Authority, where it's nationwide quoting, or state. And that's how we did the last two pneumatic tire rollers. But this one, I neither have state pricing yet, or if it's available, or NJPA pricing. So I'm still working on that. I do have a CAT salesman that's working on that for me as we currently speak. As I said, this just kind of came up across my plate here in the last few weeks, and I kind of put a high priority on it, because I can't just see, spending $10,000 a year on a piece of equipment. This current equipment is pretty much held together with bubble gum and rubber bands, I think, because right now a lot of the adjustment features on it don't function. So I mean, if we were to bring it back up to factory spec, I would guess we would be spending another $10,000 this year. I haven't gone that far on this.
So I have one other question, Richard. Would you be able to sell this secondhand to someone else, this existing piece of equipment?
Yes, and it's a common type of piece of equipment, but it may be just for parts. It wouldn't, I don't know that it would be a high value.
Okay.
But this is the one, this has not been budgeted.
Correct.
Okay.
Was not even on the previous Roadmaster's 5-year plan.
And if you're recommending purchasing this, where would the funds come from?
I would purchase it out of a cap outlay, and I think I could fit it into the current cap outlay budget, because some of the items that I had received quotes for in that budget actually came in lower.
Okay. What would be the turnaround from ordering to receiving? Would you still be able to use it in this year's construction season?
Well, the CAT rental salesman, he's actually bringing one down next week for our chip seal program, that we could use it on our chip seal for a demo. So a free demo, so staff could actually drive it, utilize it, and to get more information. So I believe it's a common piece of equipment that if we were to move forward and purchase it, we would definitely I'd say 30 days, 60 days, but we would definitely be using it for this next fiscal year's maintenance programs.
And you'll be chip sealing next week down on the Checo River?
Correct. Monday and Tuesday, we're chip sealing 3 miles of South Bank Checo River Road.
So maybe you could demo a couple miles on the Agnes Road.
Yes,
Lowry Canyon, oh boy.
I just sent an email this morning, follow up from our meeting with the new supervisor, Merv.
It kind of felt like you two connected last night.
Yeah, no,
That was great.
He makes things happen. He's my type of person. And so I reached out to Paul Podesta, the road engineer, to see if we can do an IGA to kind of help with sweeping that road. I've received customer requests, like they have a triathlon event here in a couple of weeks. They go, hey, road department, can you help us do this? We can't because it's not a county road, it's a U.S. Forest Service road. So I'm reaching out to the U.S. Forest Service to try to make an IGA where they would pay us to help maintain their road.
For those of you who are just joining the conversation here, this particular issue is on South Bank Road going up to Agnes. Up to Lobster Creek is a county road that we maintain, and after that it turns into a forest road. Correct me if I'm wrong?
That's correct.
And so there's been some issues up there that there's some breaks and dips and some issues, but it's not, so we have to create an agreement so that we can take our equipment up there and work on that road. That's what they're discussing.
Correct. We have to drive between our county roads in Agnes and our county roads here in Gold Beach, I believe it's 21 miles of U.S. Forest Service roads. And we drive by all their road slides, all their potholes, all their maintenance issues and rocks on the road, which cause us problems too. If we're able to just drop a blade down and push stuff off, we do it. But other than that, we do not spend any road funds on maintaining that road. And so...
Except the first 8 miles.
Just that first 8 miles we own. And then after that up in Agnes we own again. And so I talked with Dan Crumley last night, and he also said that there used to be an IGA with the U.S. Forest Service to help them in these matters. So I'm trying to bring that back to life. As I said, I sent an email out this morning.
Good.
So this one's in process, basically.
It's in process, but it's not approved or
Correct,
authorized.
but it can't be here today anyway.
No.
Okay. So unless there's any other questions on this one, why don't we move to the next one?
Okay. Okay, this next one is the 420 F2 Cat backhoe, and this was on the previous Roadmaster's 5-year replacement plan for this year, and I put it in my plan as well. And this is part of the approved $650,000 in equipment for cap outlay that was approved by the budget committee this year. And this is replacing an older, worn out backhoe that all the hydraulics are worn, all the pivots and pins. When you go to utilize the backhoe, you stop the controls and the bucket keeps going for another couple of feet because it's all worn out. And so what I'm looking at doing with this is another go-to piece of equipment that we use in our culvert replacement program. And this new piece of equipment is going to have another couple of attachments to make it more efficient and effective with that. One is there's going to be a compactor device that goes on the backhoe. So when you're backfilling excavations, instead of having someone down there with a hand tamper, power tamper, this equipment has a vibrator that just pushes down on that rock and compacts it very fast. And then it also has an attachment for breaking through thick asphalt and like a jackhammer. So instead of a person with a 90-pound jackhammer, you have this backhoe with this big, massive hydraulic breaker that we could also use when we have landslides. In the past, we've had landslides that were so the boulders were so massive that we could not break them or lift them or move them because they were the size of a pickup truck. So this backhoe would have those other two pieces of equipment as part of it.
Is that attachment a point, like a point attachment on
Yes.
that thing that hammers away at rocks?
You can get multiple attachments, but we're going with the point.
Okay.
But they do have one that's a wedge.
So that can do concrete or boulders or asphalt.
Correct.
Got it.
And so this piece of equipment is the trailer and the hoe is all under that National Joint Powers Authority pricing. That's already been pre-bid. So in the past, we've gone with that and not reach out for 3 bids because it's already been done nationally.
But it's been approved. You're working on it. When you come back with final proposal or proposals, then you just bring it back to the board for approval, correct?
Yes, it's on next week's
Okay.
agenda.
Okay.
Routing
For the
stuff.
first?
On the 1st.
Yep, okay.
And the next one is Craftco, a crack sealer, and this was on the previous Roadmaster's 5-year equipment plan, and I also have it on my plan for this year. And this is something that we've never had. This is a piece of equipment that's designed for preventive maintenance to get longer life out of our roads. And how that works is a lot of our roads have linear cracks in it, and you'll notice, like when you go down the state highway, there's like rubber lines everywhere on the highway. But what the state's doing is sealing off these cracks so water cannot get into the road base. Once water gets in the road base and heavy traffic goes over it, the road will, and there's water, and it'll start pumping. And you may have seen it in the wintertime where you go down a road and there's mud coming up through the asphalt. And so eventually that leads into alligator cracking, and now you have a pothole. So this piece of equipment would be for preventing the deterioration of the roads to where it is going to be a corrective repair. So do preventive maintenance to save money from future corrective repairs. And it's what I was used to earlier in my career when I worked for City of Sunnyvale. That was part of the road maintenance program. And so I agree with the previous roadmaster that we should get this equipment, and it is in our budget, and it is at NGVA pricing.
Richard, is this a piece of equipment that basically kind of spits out a hot mixture of like oil tar with some pebbles or rocks?
No, it has like a hot rubber oil mix that it is pulled by a utility truck, and it requires 2 operators. One, there's a high power air compressor where the first operator blows out the crack to get it clean as they can, and then the second operator follows behind the trailer that has an auto load feed that drops these hard rubber blocks of rubber into the melting pot, and then it goes through the melting pot into a wand that the operator falls behind, and he just fills the crack with this wand, and it has a little squeegee on it. So you just put in what you need to fill that crack, and then it seals that crack so water cannot get in your road base. And how I would use that equipment is that before we have like a 10-year plan, no, excuse me, a 5-year plan for chip seals and overlays. What I would do the year before that chip seal overlay, we would go in there and crack seal that road, so that way it would be done before the chip seal, because if you don't fix the crack, it'll come through again, and water will get through that base even if you overlay.
How many miles of road does the county maintain?
We maintain 200 miles of paved roads and 24 miles of gravel roads.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on that?
Nope.
Okay.
I just have one question, Richard. What's the life of these machines?
With good preventive maintenance, I believe we get 15, 20 years. The thing that we're doing now is we follow a Caterpillar program with our equipment, and what we do is during different cycles, maintenance cycles, we take oil samples from all the different hydraulic and transmissions and engine oils, and we send them to we have these special sample balls, and we send them to Caterpillar, and they look at them to see if there's any wear and tear of any of the components in that section of the equipment, so you can prevent like a catastrophic failure And so with good preventive maintenance, just like preventing a road, you do the same with your equipment. You get more life out of it. The other good thing that I'm doing is that I'm reorganizing the shop so that our storage buildings can hold our equipment indoors, because we live in a highly corrosive environment, and the salt air here along this coastal area, it really attacks our equipment. So I'm looking at storing our equipment better, but I'm also looking at that we've already started maintaining our equipment better using the CAT program. But also what I'm looking at doing is we don't have a equipment washing program where we wash all that salt air spray fog off our equipment, and just builds up. And so we have a pressure washer station that isn't user friendly that I would try to make user friendly, and maybe have some kind of maintenance program where we wash our vehicles every time they go into service, that they not only service the vehicle, but they wash the vehicle before they put it back out in the field. So I think, you know, we may get 15, 20 years. We do have some equipment that I have on next year's, I'm actually placing on next year's equipment replacement plan. One's 44 years old, another one's 29 years old. So we do have some very old equipment.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're working on deferred maintenance and putting money aside to take care of these equipment needs.
Thank you.
Any questions on that? Last one?
Want to go a
Okay.
little over then? Yeah.
Okay, this last one is also on the 5-year plan, but it was not on the previous Roadmasters plan, but it was on my updated plan that I made this year for the budget. And the reason why I want this piece of equipment is we spent $424,000 on asphalt blade patch repairs on slip-ins, slides all over the county. This is where in the winter time that along these canyons and river roads, the road just kind of slips out. We got to come in there and put asphalt in to bring them back up level. And in the winter time, we're held hostage to local asphalt vendors because they're not open, because it's not a good time to make asphalt. And so some of these, so there's a high cost for buying the asphalt. Asphalt keeps going up in price. The other thing is, every time we put asphalt on the road, some of these roads have like 7-8 feet of asphalt in them, and we're putting more and more weight on these roads, and you can see it in the annual costs for buying asphalts that it's doubling. The last 3 years it's doubled. 3 years ago it was $85,000, and it has to do with how many tons we're buying, not just that the cost of asphalt's going up. 2 years ago we spent $160,000. Last year we spent $424,000, and it's getting worse. And so I'm looking at buying this piece of equipment with a trailer for $135,000. I really believe that if we had this equipment this year, we could have saved easily that amount of money in asphalt repairs, and also that we could have provided more timely customer service. We could have been on there, Johnny, on the spot with less of staff and equipment, grind off the upper edge of that slip failure, because a lot of times they're like 2-3 inches. Sometimes, boom, overnight it drops 6 inches. But you got 7 feet of asphalt under there. So the idea is just grind off that top edge and taper it, put a rough road sign up, it's back in service. And we do that all winter, and we don't have to buy this asphalt anymore, especially on our lower use roads. Like Jerry's Flat Road, high use, we'll have to pave it more. But some of these roads are very low use with very low customers, and we're paying this high cost for asphalt. And those, what the vision would be, instead of patching them 5 times every winter, we'd grind them 4 times and patch them the last time. And I believe we could save 30% of our asphalt costs, which would easily cover, like this year would have covered the cost of this equipment in 1 year. So we'll be saving money in future years.
So this piece of equipment will come out and grind off the edges, smooth it out, and then there's a broom attachment that will sweep up the items and get it off to the edge.
Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Boyce?
When you said 7 feet, did you mean 7 inches thick?
No.
7 feet of pavement.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's areas that we've been blade patching them for so many years that...
7 feet deep.
Correct.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
That's shocking. Okay.
Yeah,
The
'cause we-
airport in North County has 5 or 6 feet, by design, just to take the load of the aircraft.
Yeah.
That's with no repaving. So
Yeah, no, these ones here, every time the road goes down a little bit, throw more asphalt on it. Goes down a little bit more, and you're doing that 5-6 times a year, adding 2 inches here, 2 inches there, and over the last 15, 20 years, you have a lot of asphalt.
Could you remind us
Sure, Boyce.
again, remind the public, the local asphalt vendors you say are not really accessible or available in the winter, who those companies are?
Our 2 nearest vendors are here in the South County is Tidewater, and in the North County, we get it from Coos Bay just over the county line, or a little past that, we get it, purchase it from Knife River. But both these organizations everybody paves in the summertime. That's when you do paving. In the wintertime, there's not too much paving, so they wait till there's enough small projects where it pays to heat up a plant, and then it might take us 2-3 weeks before they do that. And then so during that time, we throw some base rock on the slip and slide or the uneven, and we have to go back there all the time, daily, in some places like Jerry's Flat, to re-smooth that out to keep it safe for traffic to go over. So it's very difficult logistically in wintertime to do this. And then also wintertime, it's cold. This winter we had snow and ice, and so when you're trucking asphalt all the way from Coos Bay or Brookings to Central, that cold air is attacking your asphalt. It's in the bed of a truck. This cold air is going on it, and you're not getting some of these places where we get to are way back on these roads. You're losing asphalt temp, which also makes it not good. It makes it hard to work with, and you don't get a good product many times when you're done. So this little piece of equipment here is going to, I believe, save us a lot of money and allow us to give better customer service.
any other questions?
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Next item is item 5, Sheriff Ward, consolidation of dispatch with the City of Brookings study.
Morning. So we've been talking about consolidation for years, and this last couple of years, with the relationships that I've established with the Brookings and with the chief and everything, that they're on board with us about consolidating dispatch services. All in all, what we're trying to do is trying to get it out in its own district where there's a user board and everybody pays into this user board for 911 dispatch. But that's baby steps. But they are in agreement to look at the possibility of consolidating our dispatch centers from Gold Beach, or from Brookings to the sheriff's office. In order to do so, we don't really have the expertise. We've looked into it. The captain and the sergeant have looked into, gone to different dispatch centers and checked out how they did it. But in order to have it all done in a package of what it would take, how much it would cost, moving people around, things like that, it was suggested by past city administrator Gary Millman that there should be a study done on it, and he reached out to the Portland State University College of Urban and Public Affairs and got an estimate of what it would take to have them do a study on what it would cost to consolidate. The and I believe you have a copy of that in your packets. The total project cost for them to do the study is $35,000. Now, Brookings has agreed to pay half that if the county would pay the other half, so it's roughly $17,500 for us to do the study on that. I would suggest that, you know, it be done, so if we do consolidate, it's done right, and basically minimal cost. Keep in mind, this year, you know, we're at the end of life in our dispatch center, and all the equipment has to be replaced. We have 4 consoles, and it's roughly about $80,000 per console. So we're looking at what, $320,000 to replace our dispatch console to make sure that, because they're end of life and there won't be any parts for them. So that's my suggestion. You've got the packet and you've been able to read the project cost, and so I think if we have any other questions for me, we can bring it back to discuss it at a BOC meeting.
I just have one question, Sheriff. Where would the $17,500 come from? Would it come out of your budget?
Well, I don't have that in my budget. We'd have to figure out what to do. It's a county project, not just Sheriff's Office. It's communications for all fire departments and ambulances and other agencies. So it's just a discussion.
If you were in favor of doing this study, we would come up with a recommendation for where the money would come from and the supplemental budget for it.
Did that answer your question, Commissioner Gold?
It does. We're going to have to dig for the money, it sounds like.
Okay. Any other comments for the Sheriff? Commissioner Boyce?
I know it's a long time coming, and in having 2 PSAPs in the county, we don't have the opportunity from, for outside monies and things for assistance like from OEM. If we consolidate onto 1 PSAP, OEM would, help out with some funding issues, I would imagine. So we'll work through grants and things.
Commissioner Boyce?
If Brookings is on board, including the new public safety officer, police chief, then I think you're definitely headed in the right direction. 35,000 sounds a little bit high with the tower issues we have, but maybe it's the wisest route we can go right now.
Well, we've been discussing this for over 15 years, and finally it's to the point where, relationships that we built, that we all agree that it's time to do this, if at all possible.
And also, Sheriff, you mentioned in the meeting yesterday that it was more probable that you could get grants and so forth if you were to consolidate all of this into 1 county. Is that true?
Well, that's what my information is that I've received, that OEM would help out with the funding issues, I believe, if it was just going down to 1 PSAP. If we have 1 PSAP in the county, put it that way.
Any other questions? Commissioner Gold?
I guess my main concern about all of this, I don't know how many towers Brookings have, but I know our towers are antiquated, and whether we're going to be responsible for all of it, maybe this will come out in the study, I hope.
Well, I would imagine that would come out in the study. Brookings has 1 tower in their parking lot at the police department. The rest of the towers belong to the county. Their tower is basically for their own communication within the south end of the counties for paging out fire and ambulances and their own police departments. They can communicate through us on our towers. So I do know one thing, that they would require that we had a plan to make sure that we replaced our dispatch equipment and fixed the towers and make sure they're operational, and they're not going to have to stick a ton of money into it after we consolidate.
And I think it's really important that if we go this route, that everybody that is contacted for this, all the cities and so forth, part of that fee should be a maintenance and replacement fee.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, the next item is item number 6. This is South Coast Development Council. Sam, you wanna come up?
Okay, in your packets are a couple different things. There's been a scope of work and project that SCDC has worked on in the fiscal year 17-18. In addition to there was another update on work they've been doing on sudden oak death in Oregon forests. I thought that was interesting for you to read. But I've asked Sam to come up and talk about what we want to bring forth to them for an assignment. What kind of things do we want them to work on, and then we would develop a contract and bring back to the Board of Commissioners for review. Previous year's contracts have been signed in August and September. So it's time. Their contract ended basically in June 30th, and we could go a number of different routes, but we thought we'd bring up Sam to talk about this, and Carolyn for input also. So.
All right. First, I'm going to start with Sue. I miss you. So let's talk about some of the things that we have been doing over the last.
Excuse me, just for
Yes.
the record, you want to introduce yourself?
Sam Baugh with South Coast Development Council.
Thank you.
And one of the things that we have decided as the Development Council is to better help Curry County is we hired a individual to cover specifically Southern Curry County, meaning Gold Beach and Brookings, and that's Judy May Lopez. I think most of you at least know of her if you've not met her in person. And we've done that so we can best help with instead of having a lag period, that we would have some companies would give us a call and say, hey, I need some help. And so we'd say, hey, okay, this is the next time I'm going to be down in your area. And to better get over that hurdle, we have Judy May here so that she's a little bit quicker on the response time. But some of the things that we accomplished, you guys have seen the scope of work, some of the things that we have done. Many of our projects are still going on and still functioning. They're still being worked towards. For one of the major things that we're still, sorry, there's a fly attacking me. One of the major things that we're still working on, and I appreciate Commissioner Boyce in helping with this, is the economic impact of the Checo Bar fire. That report was scheduled to be released last week, but we had one of the funders that wanted some things that slightly altered, and so we're not altered, but more in-depth discussion. So that has been put back again another couple of weeks. So I'm open up for questions, and what is it that you want to see from as far as your economic development for Curry County?
Commissioner Boyce?
Well, just having your involvement in the sudden oak death issue is very good. And we all need to be educated on that, and it's a complicated thing, and funding, of course, is a huge part of that.
Right.
It's got to be all hands on deck to keep this in Curry County. It's been said over and over, but it is expanding, and within the last 18 months discovering the new strain, as you know, Mr. Baugh, the European strains that could really affect all of our evergreens conifers. It's a little bit scary, and so yeah, just repeating all hands on deck to figure out, and we're starting, between David Rocksmith and Senator Merkley, 2.3 million. This has been budgeted for the next year, and we need to increase that. And part of that, we've been going around Southern Oregon and trying to get other counties involved, even You know, the one nursery, the Oregon Nursery Association only gave $2,000. That wasn't much, but it was a great portion for what they could afford to do, and it demonstrates to the state and the federal people that we understand the seriousness of this, and we'll do everything we can. And so when Representative Brock Smith goes back for the emergency board in September, we really need to kind of be united. And so I really appreciate your involvement in this, and it's.
And we have written several letters of support on
Yeah.
when you're going towards the funders. Because I mean, most people, if they're not dealing with it almost on a daily basis, they don't understand what the scope and magnitude of that is, if it does spread additionally. And so that puts every county surrounding Curry County in jeopardy of losing export material.
And it's a lot of, even though it was discovered 18 years ago, we're still learning, and a lot of folks are not aware. So this is going to help very much.
Do you have any questions, Commissioner Gold?
Not at this time.
You mentioned, the renewal of the contract. Has any order of magnitude been addressed, or any, draft proposals for scope of work or requests for scope of?
Well, so there's
proposals?
there's a couple different avenues we can go before we come back to a meeting, and Carolyn has discussed a couple of these. One is just basically re-upping some of the contract with some of the work that's continuing. Correct me if I'm wrong with that, Carolyn. And then another avenue would be to basically go on a project-by-project basis, we would basically look at individual things at a time, develop a scope of work, have an overriding contract that would have addendums attached to it that we would direct them to do work. I do have to be honest, it's like, given the newness to this position and the workload, I have not had an extensive opportunity to review the contract or the work that is needed in the county concerning the economic development area. So it's hard for me to weigh in on that at this time. I don't know, Carolyn, do you have any thoughts on that, or?
Yeah, I do. Good. There's a couple of things that Sam didn't mention that I'd like to add that was completed this last year. They engaged in the Regional Tourism Network project for Curry County. We're working with Coos, Coastal Douglas, and Coastal Lane counties on that. And it's really a regional effort on tourism, so that was a part of the work that they represented us in as well.
Excuse me, what was that name again? I already forgot.
It's the Regional Tourism Network.
Thank you.
And they also, Sean had put together the applications for the opportunity zones and has provided a lot of support for the enterprise zones, and those are all related to property tax deferral for new businesses for certain periods of time. So I'd like to toot their horn a little bit because they did work on that last year, and that was helpful. Much of the work that they did was really about engaging new business owners to expand their business or bring new businesses into the area. And the tourism businesses were a part of that as well. And so what Clark and I talked about was potentially having a base contract, like you mentioned, to keep working on those things. And the bigger projects maybe that we might want to look at that we had included in last year's contract, that some progress was made but not completed. One was an industrial commercial property inventory throughout the county. That would then go on the Business Oregon website. It would be expanded into your website as well at SCDC. And the opportunity then to reach out to those different property owners would be much more evident. We could provide information to people on what the land uses are, what development potential would be, that kind of thing. The board talked about this in a year and a half ago, and it was something you were very interested at that time. You also talked about the potential for a county forest. That was included in the scope last year, and some of the base foundation research was created for that, and it's really ready to now move on if that's something we would want to do under a separate agreement. And then there was also a good discussion about a potential film commission. So that too could be a separate addendum to a base agreement. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Just a quick question
Mhm.
from memory. Originally, these agreements or this agreement began at 10,000, as I recall, and expanded to 20,000.
It did.
Round numbers
when
per year.
the-
Is that correct?
That's correct.
So that's what we're working under now, correct?
That's what we worked under last year. And
Okay.
I think it's fair to say that this whole economic development position that the county is taking is evolving. At one time, 3 years ago, you had an economic development / administration director. And you had, I think, like a $500 a year contribution to SCDC. When that position was eliminated and a lot of the work was handed down to my shop, the first contract that was bigger to SCDC was put in place for $10,000. There really wasn't much of a scope of work. It was very thin. Well, then the next year, we came up with a nice laundry list. I had a workshop here with the board, and you went through a whole series of things that you were interested in seeing. And so that work scope was fattened up, and the budget was expanded. I think now we're at a place where we've kind of gone through the bumps in the road of, what we would like to see, what SCDC with their current staff can provide, and I think we can come to kind of a happy medium between just doing a blanket, very generic agreement and then an agreement that's so specific and so long that perhaps it's not doable all in 1 year or under one agreement. So I like the idea that you brought up, Clark, about a base agreement and then a separate agreement if we want special projects like the community forest or the industrial commercial inventory. So those would be my suggestions.
And so what as staff, we're just asking the commissioners to say if they have any specific requests, let us know, give us feedback. Staff will go back and develop something and bring it back for your consideration.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Gold, did you have any questions?
No.
Commissioner Boyce?
Just Mr. Baugh, if you could introduce our South County
You bet.
rep
Judy, would you
again,
like to
maybe she
come on
wants
up
to
here real quick?
Say hello.
Hello. I decided that I didn't want to retire and stay in Brookings and do nothing, so I'm now working part-time for SCDC. And the way that I was raised, let me tell you for just a sec, if you live in the community, you give in the community, right? It's just that simple. And so that's what I'm doing, helping out where I can.
Your name.
Oh, I'm Judy May Lopez.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yeah, Judy May actually has a very extensive history in the Brookings area. She was marketing director for Chetco Credit Union back when it was Chetco Credit Union, right? Chetco Federal. And then she has been chair for the Chetco Activity Center and several other nonprofits down in the area. So I got to meet her through Rotary, where she was chair or the president of the Brookings Chamber of Rotary last year. So that's how I got to know her and tried to pull her out of retirement because she was floundering and all wayward and stuff. So
I didn't think I was floundering.
she didn't have enough stuff to do. So I pulled her out of retirement specifically to help here because I think she has the connections.
Thank you, Mr. Baugh. How far did you go back with the credit union? You remember Pat Widmer, I'm sure.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gary Gores
Oh, yeah.
was president, yeah. Kurt Lunsford hired me I moved to this area back in '81. So about 10 years later, I started with the credit union. So I was with them for, a long time, 30 years.
That's incredible.
Okay, if there's anything else?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
To agenda item 7, cell phone usage and drug testing.
Okay, this issue is brought by Commissioner Boyce to my attention. This is something that staff has no recommendation or research on, because if the commission wants to direct this to become a policy, they should direct staff to come up with this. Commissioner Boyce would like to develop a policy of not allowing commissioners to use their cell phones during meetings. And so I'm just looking for feedback. If the commissioners want to do that, they can give feedback to the administrator to say, let's develop a policy. Mr. Boyce, do you have anything to add to that?
I think it's just a potential of a good policy and a good example for the public, and eliminate as many distractions as we can. And I know sometimes I'm tempted to grab the phone and see if I got critical text, but I think it's a good example to set for the public, and that's why I offered this as a potential for us as the public officials in the county.
Question for Commissioner Boyce. I have my cell phone here as a clock. I have used it for years as a clock. I turn all the messages, everything's off, and I use it as a clock. Is that what's been the impetus for? I don't see anyone else using, with a cell phone. I've never heard. Pardon me?
We're surrounded by clocks, plus on our computers.
So that's the impetus for your.
Oh, I don't know if it's you. I have no idea if you're only using it for your clock.
Well, I just told you I was.
Oh, well.
So, but I'm saying, is that the reason behind your recommendation? Because
Yeah,
I don't see. Pardon me?
I'll just try and keep this light. I don't think you're suggesting that I'm suggesting that I wouldn't want you to be able to tell the time. You have other options here, so I don't know if it's valid that you're not using it during.
Okay, so that your insinuation is that I am. Is that correct?
I'm not insinuating anything. I ask you if it's valid. If it's obvious that it's important to you for a clock, correct? And
That's
we have,
what it is.
We
correct.
have options, do we not?
Okay.
On your computer.
Okay.
And on the wall twice.
So you've answered my question. It
Thank
has
you.
to do with my cell phone, which I will continue to use here as a clock. Thank you.
Has
Do
to
you have
do
any
with
comments,
anybody.
Commissioner Gold?
Commissioner Huxley, it has to do with anybody having a cell phone, not just you.
I would just say, I think we don't need a specific policy because we can be adults and be courteous to one another.
That would be nice.
All right, so I think I think I've heard that there's probably not consensus to develop a policy on this. Is there, do you think that's a correct assumption?
Yes.
If I'm wrong? Okay.
Could Commissioner Gold confirm that, please? That's her sense.
What was that?
Could you confirm that you agree with Commissioner Huxley and you at this time do not see a need? I think that's what you said. I just
Well,
want
I
to
sit
hear.
right next to him, and I agree with him. That's all he ever uses it for is a clock. So I have no problem with that.
Well, how do you know, though, that he only uses it for a clock? I mean, okay. All right.
So
I think you have a consensus.
yeah,
yes,
if there's
sir.
not consensus, then we're going on. Okay, so the next item on the agenda, Commissioner Boyce would like to discuss having commissioners voluntarily subject themselves to random drug testing. Given the fact that you're elected officials, I'm not sure how that would work, but your impetus or your desire for this, any comments?
Well, I think it'd be, obviously would be a volunteer. Through my Coast Guard license, river captain, it is routine and unannounced, and it's a good policy because we're responsible for an awful lot of lives when we're on a river. It's like driving a bus. I think it would set a very good example for the public, and I personally, I think it's good business and may even be appropriate for the future for us and all that this county is dealing with, all that we see around the communities, the mental health issues. I think it's just good business, and that's the way I was raised, and that's what I believe. And so, and by the way, I've passed all the drug tests for 45 years.
Okay.
Well, I just have one question. Do you suspect that there's drug use on the commission? Is that the impetus for this?
No, that's not my business, and I wouldn't, even if I did suspect that, I wouldn't answer that. The issue is, do we want to let the public know that we are clear-eyed in all circumstances, on all occasions, and clear thinking? It's not an accusation to either Commissioner Gold. It might be a little bit inconvenient, but I think that's also what we signed up for. It's usually, you know, I pay for it myself. I can be called twice in 1 week, or I can be called once in 4 months. It's random.
So I have a question. Who's going to pay for it?
Well, I pay for it myself. That's just part
Okay,
of
so you think we should pay for a drug test for ourselves, even though we know we're not on drugs?
Well, the public doesn't know that, and I'm saying that that's a small price to pay.
Okay, so I have a recommendation on here. I think if this is not going to be a county reimbursed operation, I think any commissioner is free to do their own drug testing and pay for it, and in their commissioner notes just say, I voluntarily did this, and, you know, consider
It's not random.
It's not random, you're right.
Yeah, so it's really invalid. So
Yeah.
the whole thing is to avoid any kind of secrecy and just be transparent. And as public officials, I think that's our responsibility, and that's what I believe.
I have one other question. Do you know of any other commissions that require random drug testing?
You know, working around the other commissioners around the state, I think you're going to see that over time. I don't know of any other specific county policies that require or offer that option. But again, referring back to mental health issues, different areas of what we're dealing with, developing public trust, you know, I'm obviously getting a lot of resistance here, so that's not really what I anticipated, but if that's how you both feel, then, you know, maybe I'll bring it up again 6 months from now.
Have you asked that all other elected officials do the same? That would be one question.
So we're at the top. This is our board. This is
That was not my question. My question.
I'm trying to answer it.
Was.
Thank you. I think it would develop an example, offer an example, and maybe that would generate some interest and some like-minded direction from other elected public officials. If not, let the public decide what they think is appropriate or not.
So you still didn't answer my question. My question.
No, I have not talked to any other public officials.
Okay, that was my question.
I think that is around the corner, hopefully at some point.
What about criminal background checks?
Well, we all have to pass that to run for public office.
We do?
We have to. So you haven't had a background check? I've had plenty of them. Yeah.
Are you professing that criminal background checks be let's say, not mandatory? What did you call it?
Voluntary.
Voluntary for commissioners and all elected officials. What about candidates for those offices?
So wouldn't you want your background exposed to the public if you're running for public office? So you haven't had one?
That wasn't my question. Let me repeat my question, Commissioner. Are you also proposing criminal background checks that are not done for elected officials?
No,
All right.
That's not on this proposal, but it might be a very good idea.
I'm just, that's not on the agenda. The agenda is basically, is there consensus to develop a policy?
I think it's related, Administrator Schroeder. I think these questions are definitely related. That's the reason I'm asking them. It's not that they're in.
Is there anything on the agenda, sir, that says anything about criminal background checks?
So you're not.
Would you answer my question, please?
I'm
Is
sorry?
there anything on the agenda that references criminal background checks? And is
There
that
are
a
things
proposal?
that reference voluntary checks, and I'm flowing that in to the next question to you. Are you, because
You still
clearly
didn't answer my question.
you're
Is
of
that
the
on the
wrong-
agenda, sir?
You're of the wrong understanding that commissioners have to take criminal background checks.
I'm not suggesting it's mandatory. We're not even doing that. I did say that it's good business. So is it on the agenda? Can you answer that
So,
question, and how is it related?
It's directly related. It's not on the agenda. It's a question that's arisen from me to you based on your misunderstanding, the commissioners now take a criminal background check. They do not. Would you suggest that they do, along with other elected officials and
If I made the wrong assumption, that is,
potential candidates for those offices?
Hang on.
That's my question.
Commissioner
Yes or no?
Boyce, Commissioner Boyce just want to talk about just the three commissioners.
He's got a great idea,
They're
though.
talking about just drug testing for the three voluntary drug. So those are
My
extraneous.
question,
Those are extraneous
Administrator
issues.
Schroeder, was to, not to you, it was to
I know, but
Commissioner
I'm
Boyce.
trying to just move this along.
My question is to Commissioner Boyce.
Yes.
So that's my question. Yes or no?
what is your question?
What's my
That I
question?
didn't know that background
No.
checks,
Let me-
criminal background checks are required prior to people filing for official public office. Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay. I did not know that wasn't required.
Okay.
In my world, that would just be almost a common courtesy and personal
Okay.
requirement.
Would you recommend that be done?
Not at this time, but I think it's
Then
good
you
for
answered my
discussion,
question.
and I'm glad you brought it up.
You answered my question. Thank you. Councilor Tuttle, you had a hand up.
Well, this was foreseeable, this level of discussion on this item. My question prior to the meeting was to Administrator Schroeder, and I haven't heard him bring them up to the board, but essentially, when I saw these items on the agenda, I said, how did you decide to put these items on the agenda? And he didn't think he could tell a commissioner that he couldn't put an item on an agenda. And I said, well, wouldn't it make sense to say, is the board interested, perhaps during his administrative report, I've had a request to put this on a workshop, is the board interested? And then not presume that we're going to talk about, just see if there's interest, and then schedule a workshop. Again, it's kind of, I think the county could benefit from direction from the board to Mr. Schroeder on how to put items on workshop agendas for the best use of the public and the county's time.
Well, if I may,
Commissioner
that would
Boyce?
suggest that you made a mistake by following my lead and my request, and I'm going to stand firm against that. You don't have to agree. That's not your job. We didn't have that discussion. You asked me some pertinent questions. I said, here's why. You put it on the agenda as elected public official. I appreciate you did. I don't want you taking the heat for me on this one. Fair enough. Thank you.
No, this is a general overall, regardless of this issue, this is an issue I think maybe I could use the preference of the board, which is, can any commissioner put anything on an agenda at any time for a workshop?
So now we're changing the agenda to add that as part of the discussion. Is that correct?
Nope, that would be something we would bring up at a
Okay, thank you.
future workshop. If people are interested in talking about that, we'll bring that up.
Okay.
So that's a very good point, Commissioner Boyce, which is it's not on the agenda, so you're right, we should talk about that later.
And it sounds like that's going to help you in your job and
It
give
would
us
help
all a
me,
better
yes.
understanding.
Yep.
Great.
So
Thank
I'll
you.
bring that up at the next...
So this agenda item is, do we have a consensus before the Board of Commissioners to offer voluntary drug tests as the leading public officials of this county?
Not for me, you don't.
I think it's actually whether you have consensus among the Board of Commissioners to direct staff to develop
Yeah,
a policy.
Commissioner-
and bring it
Commissioner
back.
Gold?
Spend a lot of time on it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gold?
I'm really not in favor of setting up a policy, but if there's some instance where you suspect that one of the commissioners is using drugs, go to county council and maybe he can come to us and discuss the problem with us.
There is no suspicion, Commissioner Gold. That's twice that I've offered that. Fair enough.
How come me? How come, Commissioner Gold, how come you picked out to go to county council if there's a suspicion of drug use?
Because
You're
you're
our-
the legal person. You're supposed
You're
to
our
know
go-to
everything.
guy.
We can't go to the commissioner himself because we can't talk to him, so.
I see. Thank you.
Therein lies a big part of the problem.
Take one and pass it down. All right.
Okay, so do we have any other
I have
comments on this?
I have what understanding of direction from the commissioners.
Pardon me?
I have an understanding of the direction from the commissioners, which is we're not going to develop a policy.
Okay. That was a copy that he just passed on to me.
The sound in the background.
Yeah, okay, I just wanted to make... Okay, so, then we're going to move to
Item 8.
agenda item 8, using Google for agenda preparation. Administrator Schroeder.
Okay. What you have before you basically is a couple screenshots from what I'm proposing to help save staff time. Right now, I find the packet process to be burdensome for John Jesuit to put together. As you saw, the last one was 398 pages long. It gets rather lengthy. It's large enough that you can't email it out to people, and sometimes people in the county have spotty internet coverage as it is, or they have limitations on what they can download. What I'm proposing basically is we would basically put items up on Google Drive. The first page of what you would see on your packet here is just lists. You'd have a meeting like July 18th. The second page, you look on the packet, it would list each individual item that's on the agenda. And so if somebody was just interested in item number 7, they just have to download item number 7. And it wouldn't involve having to download 398 pages and cruising through to get to page 127 to get to item number 7. I think it'll just save JJ a few hours at least every meeting of not having to do this. And it will be accessible on Google Drive. I have checked with our IT individuals. They say it's a very common thing for government agencies to do this. I've been involved with a government agency that's done this before. And so from a records retention standpoint, if Google were to go bankrupt and go away, the items would obviously be kept on our own servers so that they would be retained per our records retention operation. So this would be just something for staff help. And I'm just looking to see if there's any, I feel I probably can do this, but I just want to make sure the board doesn't have any objections to this.
Is there a way to get a technological demonstration of that? For instance, you've got some screenshots that are microscopically printed on a handout.
Yeah.
And
Eloquently put.
What I'm wondering is if it might be a lot easier to understand what you're talking about if you were able to, whatever those screenshots are, wherever they came from, put them up on this TV and walk everybody through step by step what you're talking about. You mentioned it'd be beneficial to staff, and I'm assuming you're talking about, me as well, but I would just like to see a demo of it before, if that's easy enough to do. I don't know how it works, but
yeah, I can just do that during my administrative report on the 1st. I can just bring that up. I have not worked on this computer here to log in. It's just basically what happens is we created a Google account with the BOC address, so that that will carry forward regardless of who's working for the county. It's the same address, same login. Everyone will carry through with it, and I can just demonstrate that in my administrative report. I'd like to maybe practice that before I do it live right now, because I've never worked on this computer here.
Well, just to comment though, I mean, it's commonly done with different entities all over the world, but
yeah.
And you mentioned, that it was done where you came from. I'm sure it's, I would suggest also, you could just send us a link, to the municipality. It doesn't have to be a municipality, but to a municipality that does it. It's not confidential. It's not restricted information. It's just be a website. It would be a link that anyone could go to tinker around with it, in preparation for your presentation.
Okay.
So,
Yep. I'll put that together.
or a couple or 3 or 4 different links.
I'll put that in my administrative reports on the 1st.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Boyce, did you have any comments?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Gold?
I just say I think it's a good idea to make it easier for the public to access the packets without having to go through 500 pages to get to where you want to go. So I think it's a good thing.
Okay. County Council, did you want to
No, I just,
on,
it just,
on that? Here was a good point.
right, I mean, it reminds me of when we did our GIS and the people from Lane County came in and they put our new map system up and they said, here's how you use it, and they walked you through it. I mean, I didn't think my idea was anything too out of the ordinary, that's all, so.
Okay, so we're going to go to agenda item 9, public comments and commissioner interaction. Administrator Schroeder.
So this is just for, I guess, my comments, and we can go a couple different ways on this. You can direct staff to change your meeting decorum to address this, and if not, you can just do it for your own consumption. I bring this to your discussion purposes for observing meetings I have attended so far. I've noticed commissioners engaging with the public during the public comment period. Public comments are meant to give the public the opportunity to inform the Board of Commissioners of concerns they have had, items which they should be considered for future agendas, items which the public would like the Board of Commissioners to give direction to the administrator to research and bring back for consideration, and recommendations, opinions, and feedback. Public comment period is not the time for commissioners to engage in dialogue with the public for a couple of reasons. Opening discussion on topics you have not noticed publicly ahead of time is not the standard practice. I quote a ORS Rule 192.640. Basically talks about the fact that you need to notice the items which you're going to be discussing. This is not to say you can't add things to an agenda, but as a general rule, opening discussion during public comments is ill-advised. The other reason is the public is for this policy. A policy-setting board has not done the research and or recommendations from staff regarding issues which are going to be discussed during public comments. My recommendation is to limit dialogue to saying thank you for the comments, and we will consider adding this to a future agenda. So those are just kind of my thoughts on it. I noticed last meeting there was a lot of dialogue with people at the podium that were doing public comments. My recommendation is that you take the feedback for what it's worth and not engage.
Commissioner Boyce?
Councilor Huddle, are you, maybe you haven't had time to review this. I know your plate's pretty full, both of you, but are you kind of in agreement on this without recognizing the proper public notice? We might be in jeopardy by having the slightest exchange with the public, that we're breaking that?
Well, I think your phraseology and Mr. Schroeder, what I understand Mr. Schroeder to be recommending is to, as a general rule, acknowledge the comments from the public and, you know, at the appropriate time, look into them. That's a usual standard practice. It's very often that some of the comments that they're making towards a commission are better handled at a staff level, and that the commissioner would just say, you know, we've got our public works director here in the audience, or we have our planning director, or even the administrator, if you contact the administrator during normal business hours. I mean, that level of it. But to then, what I think he's talking about is if all of a sudden, for instance, the board just takes what essentially is a unnoticed item and tries to develop a decision on the spot on it. The other thing Mr. Schroeder said, which again I think is a good general rule to follow, is to allow staff to analyze it and bring back recommendations and at a later time versus just have someone come in and take a vote on an item that's not on the agenda. That being said, the public meetings law says that the principal topics of any meeting shall be on a published agenda. This requirement does not prevent a local body from considering other items. So when you said the slightest interaction, I think is the word you used.
Touchy though, isn't it?
I agree. It's a case-by-case basis, but I think what, and you know, our meetings are long and the public comment section is limited, but I think what Mr. Schroeder is saying, listen, as a general rule to help the meetings move along, let's not, you know, latch on and take a deep dive into every public comment that comes on, particular ones. And I don't know if Mr. Schroeder wants to just interject at any time and say, staff will look into this and get back to you, and that might help the commission understand that it'll be looked into. But I think what he's trying to do is do his job as managing our meetings, and so I agree with his recommendation. That's a very standard common practice, but I also think the public records or public meetings law is flexible enough to allow the board to consider an individual comment that comes up without notice. But that's the exception rather than the rule. And I think Mr. Schroeder's trying to do a general rule.
Yeah,
So
that's a good summary. Yeah, this is more of a recommendation. I don't think what you're doing is against the law or illegal. But I think from just a management practice, I would recommend that you not engage in a dialogue with public comments.
I think that's explicitly clear in the order number 20401 for ground rules for Board of Commissioner meetings. It's explicit in there that we will not do that. I don't know how it could have been any more explicit. And I say that's in a standing order. Commissioner Boyce?
Yeah, there's a perception in Curry County that we, as a board, tend to hide behind these rules, so therefore don't have to be accountable, don't have to answer. The public, I'm not speaking for the public here, I'm giving my opinion on what often the general perception is that we don't have to be held accountable. It really, and I've communicated this many times, it's hard for me to, in any way, discourage the public from participation. I understand that we can't have a meeting breakdown with give and take sort of deal, but we have to follow our own rules. And there is also the perception out there that we skirt around those at times. And so, yeah, not having the public involved, I think long-term makes our responsibility to solve problems much more difficult. And so we need that public input. As far as the meetings, I'm just a little bit wary of hearing how we got to have shorter meetings. We only meet every 2 weeks on a general meeting basis. And so I just, and we've been down this path before. I'm glad you recognize it. You certainly recognize the council huddle in the past. Maybe we need more meetings. Maybe we need, if we're determined we're going to have shorter meetings, and at least the appearance of at the expense of the public and their testimony, that just rubs me the wrong way. It really does.
We're not, I'm asking the public to limit.
Okay, but I'm just telling you what I think the perception is. I'm not reading that in. You're right. I'm not reading that into this.
It has nothing to do with public comments. It has to do with the behavior of the board.
But for the 18 months I've been here, there has been an effort to keep the public. All right, George, you're going to be on 3 minutes, okay? And if somebody drives all the way from Brookings, I don't like that serious restriction. I think it drives from Port Orford or Agnes or whatever. Anyway, that's my take. That's all. Thank you.
Just, I'm sorry.
I was going to see if you want to.
Well, for, I guess, a comment, talking about we need more meetings maybe. No, we need to run the meetings better and not more meetings. The last meeting began at 10 a.m. in the morning and it ended about 3 minutes to 5 that afternoon. And just a comment, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the source for these comments are in the State of Oregon Department of Justice Attorney General's Public Records and Meetings Manual. 2014 is the latest edition. But on pages 150 and 151 in that manual, and now that's not the PDF page number, that's the number on the printed page in the manual, gets into public attendance and public comments and so forth and so on. And this, you want to see restrictions on speaking, you go up to some of the state legislature in public hearings that they have, and they would not function if they did not have these restrictions. But you think we're restrictive here? We're not at all restrictive here. You are limited if you are even allowed to speak at some of those public meetings up there in testimony. It is very restrictive. You could not conduct business if it was not that way. But again, these 2 pages go into that the public, it just starts saying the public meetings law is a public attendance law, not a public participation law. And only, well, anyway, anybody interested can read them, pages 150 and 151. Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you. It gets back to the law. And as I've said so many times in this 18, 19 months, the priorities become the rules. And the serious problems we have absolutely get compromised. And so it's just more of the same. That's not to suggest that through the 2 administrators we have had, 3 if you count Council Huddle, that we have made some wise and valuable corrections, amendments, and fulfilled our responsibility there. But when it becomes, as I have communicated so many times, a distraction to what we've got to get done, it's I don't know, for lack of a better word, it's demoralizing, and I think the public is disappointed and should be, in my view. Thank you.
This country was founded and has put it at the top of the pinnacle as a democracy, and runs by the rule of law. That is what has made this a great country.
And I couldn't agree more, but we're also a republic, which is a representative government, and that's the beauty of the Constitution. That is the Bill of Rights. It's individual responsibility to understand right from wrong and have that moral outlook on everything we do in our lives and how it affects others.
So, any other comments?
I would just say that regarding the 3 minutes, I think most people can express their opinions and so forth in 3 minutes. That doesn't bother me. I also think that if they have more to go over, we could suggest that they get it on the agenda for the next meeting or speak to staff. Because I think a lot of times we're very inefficient in this area. And I'm going to point a finger at myself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't agree that we've been terribly inefficient. Perfection? No. Good progress. That's even questionable, but thank you.
Okay, so it is 11:40. We will recess this workshop and come back at 1 p.m. for an executive session, which is item number 10 on this agenda here, and that would be pursuant to 192-610 subsection 2 subsection D to conduct deliberations on regards to carrying on labor negotiations. So thank you.
If yours is the next big idea and you need the right place to fine-tune it, build it, launch it, if you're only your best.
July 25th, 2018. It's 1:06 p.m. and we are now going to go into executive session pursuant to ORS 192-610 subsection 2 subsection D.
Mr. Vice Chair, if I may, I would like to suggest that the board not go into executive session until we actually offer or make a consideration for offer. So for what we have to discuss,
No,
my opinion, we don't have to be in
and I'm going to
executive session,
continue.
and therefore, I'm talking, sir, therefore we can
You
be
were not
very-
recognized pursuant to, we're going to continue pursuant to 192-610 subsection 2 Subsection D,
Mr.
we're going to
Chair,
go into executive session
As a county
to
commissioner,
conduct
I have the
deliberations,
responsibility and the right
and you are
to offer.
being insubordinate.
No, not to you, yes, sir.
Deliberations with persons
So may
designated
we
by the governing
continue
body to go
with the
into labor
discussion
negotiations.
if we need to go
We
into
are into
executive
executive session.
No, we're not.
Yes, sir, we are.
We haven't even heard from Commissioner Gold, sir.
Yes, we
You're doing
yes, we have.
You're doing an authoritative thing here. You have
Okay,
no right to
and
do.
I will adjourn, sir. I will
Of course you
adjourn
will.
this meeting
Just like
if
when I
you
tried to give a
continue
fire
with your
report, you
with your
walked out of the
disrupt-
room.
Hold on, why don't we just take a
Okay.
vote on, why don't we take a
Okay.
vote on this?
We haven't even heard from Commissioner Gold.
That's what I'm saying, let's take a vote on it. Do we want to go into executive session?
I think for bargaining, we need to go into executive session.
And we need to have some decorum from some human beings here in this meeting too.
How about some
Commissioner
public
Gold.
discussion for
Okay, we are going
transparency,
into
too,
we are
with
in
folks that
executive
we're
session.
responsible to serve.
We are in executive session.
Okay. Did you get that, Charles?
Yeah, Charles, you're a little quick on the switch there, but thank you.
Okay, it is 1:48 p.m. Wednesday, July 25th, 2018. We have just come out of executive session. No decisions were made during executive session, but we are going to adjourn this workshop. Thank you.